It had been 5 years, but that morning, something pulled me into Daniel's room. Maybe it was the silence in the house, heavier than usual. Maybe it was the way the sun hit his door, just barely ajar. Or maybe it was because I had nothing left to lose. The room was exactly how he'd left it, bed unmade, school books still on the desk, posters curling at the edges. His backpack leaned against the dresser like he might walk in any minute and grab it. It smelled faintly of that teenage mix of body spray and detergent. I stood there, not daring to touch anything, just breathing it in like oxygen. I whispered, "I'm just going to tidy up a little, baby. Maybe throw away a few things you didn't need." The words caught in my throat. My hands trembled as I reached for the bookshelf, fingertips brushing over the dust-covered spines. I pulled out a few old notebooks and some dog-eared paperbacks. That's when something fluttered to the ground, a bright blue card, the kind kids give their moms on Mother's Day. I picked it up. The front was covered in glitter and crooked hearts. On the inside, in Daniel's sharp, slanted handwriting, it read, "Mom, I love you. Always." My knees gave out. I slid down to the floor, the card pressed against my chest. That old, raw pain burst open like it had just happened yesterday. The sob that escaped me didn't sound human. 5 years. 5 years without his voice, his laughter, his shoes by the door. 5 years of pretending I was surviving. But the truth was, I hadn't lived a single day since he left. Daniel had just turned 16. He was tall, beautiful, full of charm and kindness. Everyone adored him. He loved hiking, music, tinkering with old gadgets. There was so much life ahead of him. So many things I thought I'd get to see: his graduation, his first heartbreak, his wedding, grandchildren maybe. I was supposed to be there for all of it. But life doesn't ask permission before it shatters you. I glanced around the room again, imagining what it might have looked like if he'd lived. Maybe he would have gone off to college by now. Maybe the posters would have come down and a framed diploma would hang in their place. Maybe there'd be a suitcase in the corner instead of a dusty backpack. But the room was frozen. Time had stopped here the same way it had in my chest. "You'll never get married," I whispered to the walls. "I'll never hear your voice grow deeper. I'll never have grandkids to spoil. You left, and time left with you." A cruel memory tugged me further under. The day he died. The last day we were together. He had been packing for a camping trip with his classmates, something organized by their outdoor club. It was supposed to be a week in the hills, supervised, planned, safe. I'd helped him pack, folding extra socks, stuffing a first aid kit into his bag like it would actually protect him. "Take the extras," I'd told him. "You'll thank me when your feet are dry." He laughed and rolled his eyes. "Mom, I'm not a rookie." Still, I remember the nervous flutter in my chest. Something didn't sit right, but I smiled and joked instead of speaking it out loud. "I'll miss you," I said, trying to sound casual. "I'll be fine, Mom. You worry too much." And that was the last thing he ever said to me in person. I exhaled long and slow, clutching the card like it was the last thread tying me to the earth. That day, I had no idea my world was about to end. I'd packed him trail mix and love, and he'd walked out the door full of dreams. I would never get that day back, and I would never get another one with him. He had been so excited for that camping trip. It wasn't the first one he'd gone on with the outdoor club, but it was the longest. 2 full weeks in the woods, with his classmates and their instructor. I remember thinking it was excessive. Why 2 weeks? Why not just a weekend? But Daniel had insisted. "Mom, it's going to be epic," he'd said, grinning as he shoved snacks into his bag. "We're doing this whole survival thing. No cell phones, no cabins, just tents and stars." I tried to smile. "Sounds intense. Just don't forget to bring your allergy meds." "Yes, Mom." "Geez, you act like I'm 5. I laughed, but the unease stayed. It sat in my gut like a stone. The night before he left, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, then got up to check his bag one more time while he was in the shower. I added another pair of socks. tucked in a little envelope with some extra cash. Just in case. Moms always do that. Prepare for things we can't name. The morning he left, he gave me a quick hug and a distracted "love you" before bounding into the school bus. I stood on the sidewalk, waving even after the bus had turned the corner. Like if I waved long enough, he'd come back. That afternoon, I cleaned the house in silence, pausing in the doorway of his room. I didn't go in. I just stood there, listening to the quiet. The first week passed slowly. I busied myself with work, kept my phone close, waited for updates on the school website. Everything seemed fine. The instructor, Mr. Brennan, had checked in with the school staff, said the kids were doing well, weather was perfect, no issues. Then came the night. It was sometime around 3 a.m. I woke up suddenly, sitting bolt upright in bed. My heart was racing, as if someone had jolted me from the inside. I clutched at my chest, breath shallow, head spinning. "Daniel!" I called out before I even realized what I was doing. There was no answer. I tried to brush it off as a bad dream, some subconscious anxiety, but I couldn't sleep after that. I paced the house barefoot, checked the locks, made tea I didn't drink. I kept looking at the clock, at the phone, back at the clock again. At sunrise, I called his phone. It rang, and rang, and rang. Then the robotic voice, "The person you're trying to reach is unavailable," I called again, and again. Then I called Mr. Brennan's number. No answer. I called the school's emergency contact line. No one picked up. They weren't expected back for a few more days. Maybe they were out of service range. Maybe the phones were off. Still, I knew. I didn't want to know, but I knew. By noon, I was in full panic. I drove to the school, demanded someone do something. Finally, around 2 in the afternoon, the call came in. Daniel had drowned. That's what they told me. Just like that, a flat line over the phone. "Your son was found unresponsive in the lake early this morning." No context, no explanation, just a silence that followed me for years. I remember falling to my knees, the phone slipping from my hand. Someone helped me into a chair. I think it was the school nurse, maybe a secretary. I don't remember her name. I don't remember much of anything after that, except darkness and the sound of my own scream. The funeral was a blur. People cried and brought casseroles. My husband, Stephen, stood beside me but barely touched my hand. He was already slipping away. A week later, he exploded, screamed at me, "You're the one who encouraged him to go. You and your stupid idea of letting him be independent." I didn't argue. I let him blame me, because I blamed me too. I kept replaying every moment, every sentence. If I hadn't let him go, if I'd said no, if I'd trusted my gut. But that's the curse of being a mother. We think we're supposed to protect them from everything, even fate. Stephen left not long after, packed a bag and walked out. Said he couldn't look at me without thinking of Daniel. I didn't stop him. I stayed in that house, in that silence, with only one thing left that mattered, Daniel's room, and the memory of the boy who should have come home. After Stephen left, the house became a tomb. Not just because Daniel was gone, but because the last traces of life went with them. The laughter, the footsteps, the noise, even the creaks in the hallway seemed quieter, as if the house itself was mourning. At first, people came. Friends, neighbors, coworkers. They brought flowers and food. They sat on the couch and said all the things people think they're supposed to say. "He was such a bright light. You're so strong. Time will help." Time didn't help. It didn't soften anything. It just stretched the pain out into something I could wear like a second skin. People stopped coming. I don't blame them. Grief makes people uncomfortable. They want you to cry for a while, then dust yourself off and be okay again. They don't know what to do with you when your sadness doesn't end. And mine didn't. It settled in, deep and stubborn. I returned to work 2 months after the funeral. My boss had held my job for me, a clerical assistant at a small public office. I went in, wore the clothes I always wore, smiled just enough to not worry anyone. But I could feel it, the way people stiffened when I walked in, how conversations would suddenly shift or fall silent. Like my presence made things too heavy. I didn't blame them for that either. I was heavy. My eyes, my voice, my breath, they carried the weight of a boy who wasn't coming home. Eventually, I asked for a transfer. There was an opening in the dispatch room, buried in the back of the building. A small, windowless office where the phones rang and nobody asked you to make small talk. It paid less, but I didn't care. My supervisor hesitated. "You sure about this, Lillian? It's pretty isolating back there." I gave him a tired smile. That's the point. So I took the job, sat in a little gray chair behind a little gray desk, and answered calls from people who didn't know me. Didn't expect me to smile. Didn't feel the need to mention Daniel. Every night after work, I came home to the same quiet house. I'd heat up something bland from the freezer, sometimes not even eat it, then drift down the hallway and into Daniel's room. That was the only place I felt, not okay exactly, but less fractured, less lost. I didn't talk to anyone anymore, not really. Just Daniel. I'd sit on the edge of his bed, like I used to when he was sick or had nightmares. I'd tell him about my day, about how the coffee machine still made that awful noise, how a caller had asked if Lillian from the front desk still worked there. I'd tell him I missed him, that I hated this life without him, that I didn't know what the point of any of it was. I wasn't crazy. I didn't hear voices or see shadows. I knew he wasn't really there, but pretending, just for a little while, made the unbearable slightly less so. That room became my sanctuary. Every surface stayed just as he left it. His notes still taped to the wall. His backpack untouched. His headphones still looped around the bedpost. I vacuumed carefully around them, dusted lightly, afraid to disturb the air. It's strange how pain can become a routine. Grief folded itself into my days, into the quiet rituals of survival. Wake up, go to work, come home, talk to a ghost. I didn't expect anything to change. I didn't want it to. Change meant movement. Movement meant leaving something behind. And I couldn't bear the thought of leaving Daniel, even symbolically. So I stayed still. And for a long time, the world let me. The day they let me go was quiet. No drama. No long meeting or drawn-out apologies. Just a folded letter handed across a desk with a practiced smile and a corporate phrase. Due to restructuring, I nodded, took the envelope, walked out. I didn't cry. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel much of anything. I drove home on autopilot, parked in the same spot I'd parked in for years, and sat there, engine ticking softly as it cooled. The sun was low, casting long shadows across the driveway. Inside, the silence greeted me like an old friend. That night, I couldn't sleep. Again, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the hollow tick of the wall clock. My hands kept fidgeting under the blanket, restless like the thoughts swirling in my chest. And that's when I dreamed of him, Daniel. It wasn't like the other dreams, not the fleeting, blurred ones where he was a boy again, laughing in some memory. No, this was different. He didn't have a face. Not really. It was more of a presence, glowing softly in the corner of some unidentifiable room. But the voice, it was his voice. Older, calmer, deeper. "Mom, I'm still with you." My breath caught in the dream. I felt myself lean forward. "You don't have to hold on like this," he said gently. "Letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean I'm gone." I wanted to scream, to argue, to say I couldn't, but I couldn't find my voice. "You're living in one moment," he whispered, "and that moment has already passed. It's okay to move. It's okay to live. For me." Then he was gone. I woke up crying, but not like the other times. This wasn't the kind of crying that hollowed me out. It was something else, like something had cracked open just enough to let a little air in. The room was still dark, the house still empty, but for the first time in years, I didn't feel crushed beneath it. I sat up, wiped my face, and whispered into the silence, "Okay, I'll try." Later that morning, I walked to my closet and reached for my usual outfit, black cardigan, black slacks. My uniform of grief. But then I paused. My hand hovered over a blouse I hadn't touched in years. It wasn't bright or cheerful, just a soft blue button-down I used to wear to church. I put it on. It felt strange, like putting on someone else's skin. But as I looked in the mirror, something in my reflection shifted. My shoulders weren't as slumped. My eyes, still tired, still grieving, but less empty. I didn't go back to Daniel's room that night. Not out of defiance or guilt. I just didn't need to. I sat at the kitchen table instead, read an old magazine, and finished a cup of tea while it was still warm. It wasn't healing. Not yet. But it was movement. A flicker of something I hadn't felt in 5 years. Hope, maybe. Or the memory of hope. I whispered into the quiet again before bed. Thank you for coming to me. And even though no bird landed on the windowsill, no voice answered back, I felt the shift deep inside, like maybe Daniel wasn't the only one helping me come back to life. It was a gray morning, late October, the kind of day when the sky never quite wakes up and the air smells like wet leaves and cold stone. I hadn't planned to visit Daniel's grave that day, but something in me needed to go. Maybe because I hadn't been back since the dream. Maybe because I wanted to tell him I was trying. I don't know. I just went. I didn't bring flowers. Just a scarf wrapped tightly around my neck, my breath curling in the air as I walked through the cemetery gates. My boots made soft thuds on the damp path, and the wind moved lazily through the bare trees. I'd been there so many times I didn't need to look for the headstone. I could find it in my sleep. But as I turned the corner and approached that familiar stretch of ground, I stopped. Someone was already there. A small figure sat huddled at the foot of Daniel's grave, back pressed against the iron fence. At first, I thought it was a bag of leaves or some discarded blanket. But as I got closer, I saw it was a child. A boy, no older than 7. He didn't notice me at first. He just sat there, knees to his chest, soaked through with rain. His fingers were red from the cold, and his clothes were thin, far too thin for this weather. I approached carefully, trying not to startle him. "Hey, sweetheart," I said softly. "You okay?" The boy turned his head, just enough for me to see his face. Pale, tired, tear-streaked. "I'm fine," he said hoarsely. "Don't need anything." I knelt beside him, ignoring the cold that seeped into my jeans. "Are you here visiting someone?" He nodded once. "My mom and dad. They're buried here." My heart twisted. His eyes were so much older than they should have been. "I'm Lillian," I told him. "What's your name?" "Benji," he whispered. We sat in silence for a moment. Rain tapped lightly on the leaves above. My fingers ached from the cold, but I didn't move. "How long have you been out here, Benji?" He shrugged. "Since morning." "You came here by yourself?" He hesitated, then nodded. I didn't ask where he lived. I already knew. "Did someone hurt you?" I asked gently. "No," he said quickly. "Not like that. It's just the home is bad. The big kids, they make the little ones steal things. Smoke. Hit each other. I don't want to be like them. I don't want to be there." "Home," I echoed, though I knew he meant a group home. A shelter. He stared at the headstone, not Daniel's, but the one next to it. "I just wanted to see them," he said. "I don't think anyone else comes." The way he said it, flat, matter of fact, broke something inside me. "Benji," I said quietly, "you can't sit out here in the cold all day. You'll get sick." "Doesn't matter," he muttered. "Yes, it does," I said, firmer this time. "It matters to me." He looked at me then, really looked, like he was trying to decide whether I meant it. "My son is buried here," I added. His name was Daniel. He was 16. Benji blinked. "That's old." I smiled just barely. It was too young. We sat in silence again. Then I held out my hand. "Come on, let's get warm. There's a cafe just outside the gates. They have hot tea, maybe even cookies." He didn't move. "You don't have to tell me everything," I said gently. But I don't want to leave you here alone. Finally, slowly, he took my hand. His fingers were ice. Mine weren't much warmer. We walked together through the cemetery, two shadows moving toward something neither of us understood yet. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what came next. But I knew this, for the first time since Daniel died. I wasn't walking alone. The cafe just outside the cemetery was quiet that day. One of those small town spots with fogged windows and the smell of burnt coffee soaked into the walls. I led Benji to a booth near the back where it was warmest. The waitress didn't ask questions. She brought us 2 mugs of tea and a slice of pie without saying a word. Benji held his mug with both hands, letting the heat seep into his fingers. His cheeks were still pale, but some color had returned to them. He looked around like he didn't quite trust it, that something this simple, this safe, could be real. "You hungry?" I asked. He shook his head. "I ate at breakfast." "When was that?" He thought for a moment. "Before I left. It was early. They had oatmeal." I nodded, though the pit in my stomach tightened. His voice was steady, but too careful, like a kid who'd learned not to expect kindness. "I can take you back," I said gently. "To the home. Let them know you're safe." He flinched. "I don't want to go back." "I know. I really don't," he said, eyes locked on mine now. "It's not just the big kids. The grown-ups there, they don't care. Not really. They just wait for us to age out." I believed him. Every word. And yet, I knew I couldn't just take him home with me. That's not how the world worked. But something inside me whispered, maybe it should. "I can't take you home today," I said carefully. "But I can visit. I can talk to the staff. Ask if I'm allowed to come by. Maybe bring you here sometimes. Would that be okay?" His shoulders sagged with something that looked almost like relief. "Yeah, that'd be okay. And if you ever need anything, you can talk to me. I mean it." He nodded, then asked, "Are you always this nice?" That caught me off guard. I almost laughed. "No," I said. "Not always. I forgot how to be for a long time." Back at the home, the staff was surprised but not frantic. Apparently, Benji had gone missing before, never for long, never far. Just long enough to make his absence feel like a whisper. The kind no one chases too hard. I asked to speak to his caseworker. She was polite but exhausted, said the right things, promised someone would talk to the older boys, promised they'd look into better supervision. But her eyes had that tired glaze of someone who knew it wouldn't really change. So I asked the question I hadn't planned to ask. What would it take to foster him? She blinked. "You." "Yes, me." Her expression shifted, part surprise, part suspicion, part something like hope. "You'd need a stable income, a safe living space, background checks, interviews, references." "I can do that," I said. I hadn't worked in 2 months. My savings were thin. The house was still full of shadows and sorrow. But when I looked at Benji, I didn't see a stranger. I saw a boy sitting at a grave alone in the cold, and I saw myself. Back home that night, I sat in Daniel's room for the first time in days. But this time I didn't talk to him. I listened. To the silence. To the way the air felt different. I looked around the room. At the posters, the trophies, the books still stacked in his nightstand. I imagined another boy sleeping here. Not to replace Daniel. Never that. But to carry something forward. I whispered, "I don't know if this is right. I don't know if I can do this. But I think I have to try." The next morning, I called everyone I could think of. Friends I hadn't spoken to in years. Former co-workers. Even my old supervisor. One of them, Ronald, called back the same afternoon. "I heard you're looking for work," he said. "We just lost someone in admin. It's part-time to start, but steady hours. Decent pay." I accepted before he finished the sentence. 2 weeks later, I had my paperwork started. I bought new bedding, soft blue sheets, not Daniel's color, something different. I cleaned the room from top to bottom, careful not to erase my son, but ready to make space for someone else. The first weekend Benji came to visit, he stood in the doorway of the room and whispered, "Is this really for me?" "Yes," I said. "It's yours, if you want it." He ran his hand over the desk, looked at the bookshelves, the clean window pane. "I used to have a room," he said, "but it wasn't just mine. I had to share." "You don't have to share this one," I told him. "It's just for you." He smiled then. A small thing, fragile but real. That night, when I checked in on him before bed, he was already asleep, curled up under the new blanket, breathing evenly. And in that moment, something inside me shifted again, not in pain, but in peace. Daniel's room wasn't a shrine anymore. It was a beginning. We were 2 months in when everything almost came undone. I had just finished organizing the last of the paperwork for the foster certification. My background check had cleared. The interviews had gone well. My supervisor even gave me a glowing letter of recommendation. For the first time in years, I felt like I was building something. Bricks, foundation, walls. Not just surviving, but building. Then the call came. It was from the director of the children's home. Her voice was stiff, like she was bracing herself. "Ms. Carter," she began, "I wanted to inform you before it's official. We've had a development regarding Benji." The air in my kitchen changed. Everything slowed. She continued, "A man has come forward, Mark Taylor. He's Benji's biological uncle, the brother of Benji's late father. He has filed a request to take custody." I don't remember putting down the phone, but I heard the soft click as it landed on the table. Mark Taylor. The name meant something. I had heard it once, years ago. He was Stephen's brother-in-law. We'd met at a cookout maybe a decade ago, before everything went dark. He was quiet, lived in Dayton, didn't keep in touch with family, and apparently now he wanted to raise the boy I was about to call my son. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, staring at nothing. It felt like I was watching someone else's life collapse. Again, later that day, I drove out to the cemetery. Not to grieve, not to cry, just to breathe. I sat on the same bench where I'd first seen Benji, knees pulled close, coat zipped to my chin, eyes on the gray sky. And that's where he found me. I didn't see him approach. I just heard a voice, gentle and unsure. "Excuse me, are you okay?" I turned to look up at the man standing beside me. Mid-40s, tired eyes, familiar jawline. He was holding a bouquet of faded roses. I knew who he was before he said another word. "You're Mark," I said. He blinked. "Yes. Do we?" "We met once," I said. "A long time ago." He nodded, still not quite placing me. "Are you family?" "No," I said. "Not by blood." A pause. Then, "Benji." I looked away. "I didn't expect to find you here," he said. "But I've seen you before. A few times. You come often." "So do you," I replied quietly. We stood in silence for a while. Finally, I said, "He's a good kid." "I know," he said. "I've met him. Only recently. I wanted to come sooner, but life. Divorce. Debt. It took a while to get myself together." I didn't speak. I couldn't. "I heard about you," he added. "He talks about you. A lot." Those words hit harder than I expected. "He was mine," I whispered. "Maybe not legally, but he was mine." Mark nodded slowly. "I believe you." I turned toward him, anger rising. "Then why take him?" "Because I'm his only blood relative left," he said softly. "Because I finally can. Because I want to do the right thing." "What if doing the right thing breaks his heart?" He looked pained. "And what if it breaks yours?" I didn't answer. That night, I sat in Daniel's room. The new room. Benji's room now. His hoodie was draped over the chair. A book half open on the bed. His laughter still lingered faintly in the air. And all I could think was, I can't lose another child. I had barely survived it once. I wouldn't survive it twice. I wanted to fight, to scream, to make threats. But I knew that wouldn't help. The system favored blood ties. Mark had every legal right. I hadn't adopted Benji yet. I wasn't his mother. Not officially. But I loved him. And sometimes, love has to be louder than law. The next morning, I didn't go to work. I didn't answer the phone when the director from the children's home called again. I couldn't. I wasn't ready to hear the final decision, to face what it would mean to say goodbye. Instead, I packed a small bag with Benji's favorite snacks, a new sketch pad, and a pair of gloves I'd just bought for him, soft, wool-lined dark blue. He said blue made him feel brave. I drove to the group home like I had so many times before, but my heart felt like it was cracking with every mile. I didn't know if they would let me see him. I didn't know if Mark had already come to take him. I just knew I had to try. To my surprise, they let me in. Benji was waiting in the hallway, bundled in his coat, his eyes lighting up when he saw me. "You came," he beamed. "I was hoping you would." I crouched down to hug him. My arms shook. "We're going somewhere quiet," I said. "Just to talk." We found a small park nearby, the kind with frozen swings and a wooden bench under a leafless tree. Mark was already there, pacing in the cold, his breath fogging in front of him. When Benji saw him, he didn't run. He didn't smile. He just looked confused. "You both came," he asked. "Together." Mark and I exchanged a glance. "Benji," I said gently, "we need to talk to you." "Am I in trouble?" "No, sweetie," I said. "Not at all." Mark knelt beside him. "We want to know what you want. Not the court. Not the papers. Just you." Benji's face changed, like he finally understood something. Then he shook his head, fiercely. "I don't want to choose. I don't want to lose either of you." Mark sat back on his heels, looking up at me, his jaw tight. "We don't want to lose you either," I said. "That's why we're trying to figure out a way to stay in your life. Both of us." Benji sniffed. "Can't we just live together? Like a team or something?" That word, team, it echoed in the quiet like something too big to say out loud. Mark ran a hand through his hair. "You know, I've been thinking. I don't really have much time to Dayton anymore. My job's remote now. If I moved here, maybe we could figure something out." I stared at him. "You'd really do that?" He shrugged. "I lost my brother. I'm not going to lose his son too. And I'm not going to rip him away from someone who already loves him like a mother." Benji looked between us. "So we'd all be together." "Maybe not in the same house," I said, my voice shaking, "but in the same town. Same school. Weekends together. Dinners. Birthdays. Real family stuff." "And I get to stay in my room?" he asked. I smiled through tears. "It's still yours." He leaned his head on my shoulder. I like the idea of a team." That night, back in my kitchen, Mark and I made tea and talked like people who were no longer strangers. We hashed out ideas, schedules, plans that didn't make sense on paper but felt right in our hearts. Maybe someday he'd get a place nearby. Maybe we'd rotate holidays. Maybe, just maybe, we'd become the kind of patchwork family you only see in movies. "You know," Mark said, halfway through his second cup of tea, "I thought you'd hate me." "I did," I said, honest, "until you showed up at the grave." He nodded. "And now?" "I'm not sure yet," I replied, but I was smiling. "You're not so bad." We both laughed. It was awkward but real. The first real laugh I'd had in years. 2 months later, the court approved the final paperwork. I was officially Benji's foster parent with adoption pending. Mark signed a document too, one that gave him visitation, shared holidays, and the right to be a part of Benji's life. It wasn't traditional. It wasn't clean or simple. But it was ours, and it was working. 2 years later, the house is filled with sounds again. Running feet, slamming doors, laughter muffled through walls. Sometimes I still catch myself flinching at the noise, half expecting it to vanish like a dream. But it doesn't. It stays. Benji stays. He is 10 now, taller, louder, full of ideas and opinions and endless questions. He leaves his shoes everywhere. His backpack explodes across the hallway every afternoon. He sings off-key in the shower and tells me knock-knock jokes he doesn't always understand. And every time I look at him, my heart remembers how to beat fully again. We live in a new place now, a bigger house shared with Mark. Not by accident, not as a compromise, but as a choice. A shared choice. Yes, Mark and I eventually got married. It wasn't planned. Nothing about our lives was. But there was something about building a life with someone who had already lost like I had, who knew the shape of grief and didn't try to fix it. He didn't want to erase Daniel. He didn't try to replace him. He just stood beside me and helped carry the weight. And somewhere in the quiet days between therapy appointments, parent-teacher conferences, and dinner-time jokes, love grew. Not the blazing, heady kind I used to believe in, but the steady, healing kind that says, "You're not alone anymore." Benji calls him Uncle Dad. We never asked him to. He just started doing it one day, like it had always been the most natural thing in the world. And he still calls me Mom. It happened on my 45th birthday. I hadn't expected anything. I was folding laundry when he slipped into the room, holding a small envelope in his hands. He was quiet, nervous, his cheeks flushed in a way I hadn't seen since the early days. "This is for you," he said. Inside was a card, a simple one, blue like his gloves. There was a drawing on the front, him, me and Mark standing under a crooked tree. His handwriting was still a little messy, but I could read every word. "Happy birthday, Mom. I love you." Mom. I froze. The world stopped spinning for a second. My throat closed, my hands trembled, and before I could stop them, tears spilled onto the card. He watched me nervously. "Is it okay that I wrapped him in my arms before he could finish. "You can always call me that," I whispered. "You always could." Later that night, after he went to bed, I placed that card on the shelf in my room, right next to an older one. The one I found in Daniel's room years ago. The one that said, "Mom, I love you. Always." 2 cards, 2 boys, 2 truths. One who left me and one who saved me. I sat by the window and looked out over the quiet yard. The moon was high. The trees swayed gently, casting long shadows across the grass. Somewhere down the hall, Mark was putting away dishes. The hum of life continued, normal, soft, imperfect. And I whispered into the dark, "Daniel, we're okay now." I don't believe in ghosts, but I believe in love that doesn't end. I believe in boys who find you at graves and teach you how to live again. I believe in rooms that can hold more than one kind of memory. And I believe that sometimes healing doesn't look like forgetting, it looks like beginning again. This wasn't the life I planned, but it's the one that chose me. And I am so, so grateful.